So I'm going to introduce both our lovely guests. Did a little bit of research on them, so I'm going to read a little bit of things about them. So our first guest that we have is Bolaji Oyedele. And since joining JLR in 2018, Bolaji has worked in various roles and capacities, including vehicle engineering, project strategy, commercial and information and digital technology. She is currently the technical product owner for JLR subscription management platform. Can we give Bolaji a round of applause, please? Amazing. And then next up, we have Ignatius Kaku, who is a senior steering engineer at JLR, responsible for the steering system design, test, and delivery on all JLR SV vehicles. In 2008, Ignatius co-founded JLR's first diversity and inclusion employee network to support the career advancement of black professionals. And since then, he has continued to be a strong voice with a focus on early careers. Can we give Ignatius a round of applause, please? Amazing. And I will hand over to our lovely panel to take us through their session. Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
That was a great introduction.
I know, it's quite some research you've done, actually. Suspiciously accurate. Is your mic working?
Is it? Yes, it is. Yeah.
Awesome.
Good to go.
So, Bolaji, what's our topic? Addressing the lack of diversity in niche tech roles.
Yep.
I think it's quite a topic, actually. And to start with, what do you think? Do you think there is a lack of diversity in tech roles?
I think yes, definitely. I actually wrote down some stats that I wanted to read out. So obviously JLR is in the automotive industry, but within JLR, because it's such a large business, there are like tech roles. So my current role is within the tech space. So I like to think that I'm in the tech space within the automotive industry. And so I have some stats in both. So according to the motor industry, so this is specifically for the automotive industry, the number of female employees has reduced by about 2% in the last 2 years. Women account for only about 4% of apprentices in the automotive industry. And as you know, apprenticeships are a very key part of the automotive industry. I know loads of people that joined the industry through that route. Also, so in the UK, the percentage of the working population is about, that are non-white British, is about 18%. But in the automotive industry, we're only at around 13%. So there's that very obvious gap. And also, there's fewer apprentices, around 9% in the automotive industry who aren't white versus, apprentices outside of the automotive industry. So yeah, I think the answer is definitely yes. And I think that for me, that brings about the question of how conducive are these industries? Because similar things are also in the tech industry, so they're very similar ratios and percentages. And it brings up the question of how conducive those spaces are for Black people and how they can be improved. And also how much money companies are leaving on the table, because I think there is an argument for if you don't have a diverse workforce, how diverse can your customer base be? How well can you cater to a diverse group of customers if you don't have enough representation internally?
Exactly. And I think some good stats that you lay out there. I think definitely if we look internally at our own company, those numbers ring true in terms of how many Black people there are versus others, let me say, especially if you then start looking through. I mean, we're a big company, and one thing I've realized today actually is that people aren't quite aware of all the things that we do. Because yes, we're a car company, we build cars and that's our bread and butter, but if you look at the company, we are something like 44,000 people. We have tons and tons of different departments within, from marketing to finance to digital to data. I think if you were there at our desk, you would have spoken to Imisi, who's a data analyst. There's tons and tons of roles within ourselves.
Yes, like an ecosystem.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that definitely. I also agree that there is a lack of diversity, especially in niche tech roles, and I think there's a few explanations for that, right? Because one, black people aren't a big portion of the population as a whole. There's an example I can give actually, which is anybody watch F1 here? One person. Wow. So F1, if you don't know, the drivers are all men. There's been a few women who've tried to become F1 drivers but not quite made it. And in an interview, Gunther Steiner, who was team principal for one of the F1 teams, was asked, why do you think that there aren't enough women in F1 or enough female drivers? And the answer he gave, I think, also applies here, right? Which is, if you look at the number of women total that are driving cars and racing, the number is small. So similarly, if you look at the number of black people in total, our number is small. So then if you try and look at where are those people, what roles, what jobs, what industries they're in, of course, we have quite the deficit in tech, I think.
Yeah, agree. So I know that you're very involved with the Reach Network. So the Reach Network is JLR's race and ethnicity network. And so they focus a lot, or we focus a lot on how we can improve the underrepresentation and diversity gaps within JLR.
Yeah.
So I know you're very involved in that space, and so I think you're the right person to speak to what can be done in the industry in general, or just if you think about working environments in general, what can or what do you think would be impactful to address?
I think there's a lot that can be done. I think the simplest thing probably to do is just hire more black people. But then the problem is, are there enough black people in those areas to hire from in the first place, right? And then you always, I don't know if you guys have experienced it in your working life, you always have people who are like, oh, you only got here because you're black. You only got here because you're this kind of person or because you tick this box, etc. But that's the easiest thing you can do, just hire more black people. There's a lot to be done, I think, in terms of education, whether that's internally educating our hiring people to make sure that, I think there's a lot of research that talks about unconscious biases, especially when it comes to hiring. Oh,
Okay.
is that better? Yeah. Sounds different. There's a lot of research that talks about unconscious biases in hiring, where people are more likely to hire people who are like them. So if you think about your own backgrounds and maybe some white friends that you might have, your interests might not be the same. So if you think about your hiring manager, etc., they're thinking about their team who might be mostly white, and they're like, oh, is this person really going to understand our jokes, our little this, our that, or that? I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done in HR and in hiring managers as a whole. I think one of the best ways, actually, which is my personal passion, which is early careers and trying to get people when they're young. That way, when people enter companies, especially a company as big as ours, they feel the support from either resource groups or employee resource groups like Reach at JLR and the company as a whole, so that they don't then leave afterwards, which I think is a big problem as well. People enter companies, especially when they go on the websites, they see all sorts of colored people. It's like, oh, this is amazing, I'm going to fit right in. And I actually had an undergrad tell me this story, and they walked in and saw nobody that looked like them. But I think this is where JLR has actually been doing a lot of work in sort of allowing employee resource groups like ourselves, Reach, and other networks to sort of get out there, do events like this, raise awareness. I think that's also another big thing that can be done to address it, especially looking at our company and all the little subgroups that we have. Yep. Just sort of talking about it more, making it aware, like, actually, you can have this kind of career in a company like this. You don't need to go to like a specialist tech company or something like that. For example, your job in subscription management. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to add a couple of things to that. So on the education piece, which I know is something that the network has also focused a bit on, is educating the senior leadership as well. making sure that they understand the experiences of Black people at JLR, so that that can help them connect better with JLR employees. And also when you talk, because we've talked a lot about the Reach Network, and I think another important thing is that it's really important for employees within the business to get involved and drive initiatives that are focused on diversity and, you know, driving diversity initiatives. Because when I first joined JLR in 2018, I joined on the engineering grad scheme. And at the time, I thought diversity initiatives only had to come from the top down. Like, it has to be the senior leaders or the CEO. They have to be the only ones doing the work to identify what the issue is and then figure out what the solution is. But what I have learned over the last few years at JLR is that a lot of change actually comes by the employees getting involved. And what I've been most inspired by is seeing how much work Black and brown employees at JLR put into this area, and the amount of change and impact that has had. You know, like Mandisa, for example. So Mandisa works at JLR. She's very involved in the Reach Network, and the amount of passion and work that she's put in is so amazing. And I know that a big reason JLR is as diverse and forward-thinking as it is right now is due to employees like her who have really done a lot of work to drive change. So like, I think it's really important for everyone to know that if you have ideas around diversity or equity or inclusion, you can get involved. You should get involved. Your contribution isn't too small. It doesn't matter if you're like 1 year into your career. You have like a lot to contribute, and, you know, to basically just encouraging everyone to get involved and get started on that journey.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that also goes to things that can be done to improve the lack of diversity. Because the point you make about thinking that senior leadership would be saying, oh, we should be doing this, we should be doing that.
And they do sometimes, but, you know, a lot also comes from bottom up as well.
And part of that education point also comes in the company itself, looking at itself. So a company like us, having so many people, looking at ourselves and saying, okay, what is our makeup? What are our percentages? Black, Asian, whatever, and looking at the country and saying, actually, do we look like the country? Or do we skew one way or the other? And having that data, having that knowledge then means when the company says, oh, we're going to champion some DEI stuff, it's targeted. We know what we're doing, or we know the problem that we have to address, and we go for it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so we've obviously talked a bit about generally what can be done. So if we look at JLR specifically, what are the things that JLR has been doing around diversity, equity, and inclusion that you think has been very impactful and has helped the company progress?
That's a very good question. As our wonderful host mentioned earlier, back in 2018, I started JLR's first employee network focused on race and diversity. And back then, even though I think that was 7 years ago, things were not as they are now. The company has done a lot of work, both in the diversity space and in just trying to create a more inclusive work environment. We have something called the Creators Code, which is about behaviors that we expect not only ourselves but our seniors. So it kind of empowers you. If some big head director or something like that is being rude to you in a meeting, you in your lowly position can challenge them and say, hey, that behavior is not acceptable. And that then goes into what you were talking about in terms of change being driven from the bottom up as well, and people like us forming groups and saying, actually, we think for us to feel like this is a good workplace for us, this and this and this is what the company should be doing. And when it comes to JLR and Reach, we have quite a few work streams that's always ongoing. I think if you follow JLR on LinkedIn, you would have seen a few. There's Project Orbit, which I think you probably know more about than I do. We also have a work stream called Reverse Mentoring, where people just like us can get partnered directly with directors in the company. So what you're doing there is sort of sharing your experience. You're educating them, like, this is what someone like me experiences in this company or just in life in general, and then they can share their stories with you and you learn from each other in that way. There's also Reach Out, which I'm very, very passionate about, and that one is more so about taking all of our employees of any persuasion and targeting them at schools in racially diverse areas and saying, similar to what I said earlier, yes, we make cars, yes, we're a tech company, but look at all of these roles that you can have, and having people that do the jobs come and stand in front of the students and say, this is what I do, this is what my day-to-day is like, and sort of immerse them in that way. So maybe when they get to your level, they kind of have an idea of where they want to go, what they want to do, and which companies, and ideally ours. Do you want to speak a little bit more about Project Orbit?
Yeah. So Project Orbit, like you said, I feel very strongly about it. I think it's one of the most amazing initiatives we've had at JLR. So it focuses on Black women specifically because we know the data shows that we are an underrepresented group within the company.
Yeah.
And so Project Orbit is dedicated to finding and so helping Black women with their career progression. So finding mentors and sponsors for Black women and finding people, matching you up with people that can become invested in your career growth, and help you with developing the right leadership skills, helping you with figuring out how to get to the next step. And what I really, really like about it is that there's a focus on sponsorship. And when Mandisa set this up, she was very specific about it. So obviously mentoring is great. I think it's amazing. Everyone should have a mentor. But also sometimes you need a sponsor. So you need someone who is invested in you actually moving up. You need someone helping you to broaden your network, someone introducing you to the right people, someone identifying how you can close the skill gaps. And that's what Project Orbit is doing. So like you get matched up with a mentor and a sponsor, and you guys have a timeline and you figure out what your targets are. So it could be, I want to be in this new team in the next 2 years, or I want to get a promotion in the next 2 years, whatever it is that you want. And then you and your sponsor work together to create a plan and walk towards that plan until you get to where you want. And I'm very excited to see the amount of impacts that this will have when Black women are given not just mentorship resource, but also like an active sponsor, someone so dedicated to seeing you grow.
Yeah. I think I have something else to add to just to the end of that. And I think this is something that I wish I knew when I was, around some of your ages, which is, I think growing up, especially being from our culture, you're taught that hard work will get you everywhere that you need to go.
Your work will speak for itself.
Yes. You do good work and good things will happen to you. And that is true up to a certain level. And when you're trying to get into leadership, get into the big tables and get involved in the big decisions that get made about your career and, the people around you, your colleagues and that kind of stuff, you definitely do need sponsorship.
Yeah.
Especially from senior leaders.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah. Should we talk about difficulties?
Difficulties?
Yeah.
Oof.
I can go first. That's okay. So we're thinking about this. So difficulties with getting or being engaged in D&I initiatives. And something I've been thinking about a lot in the last 9 months is how, it's important, like I said earlier, for everyone to get involved, but it is also an additional responsibility that Black employees have to take on.
Yeah.
So you have to show up to work and not just do and excel at your actual 9 to 5. You have this additional responsibility of we need to do X, Y, and Z to make JLR or wherever you work a more conducive space for people that look like me. And I think more importantly, making sure that the people that come in after you have a better experience as well. And that is a big commitment. And I think that sometimes balancing that and your 9 to 5 can get tricky. I think also because this can sometimes be, there's an emotional aspect to it.
Yes,
and so you also have to deal with that and know how to balance that. I think also that this can also come with awkward conversations. I think at the moment in the UK in general, I think that maybe we are at a point where those conversations aren't as awkward as they used to be like 20, 30 years ago, for example. But they can still feel difficult and awkward. And that's like an additional difficulty that you need to take on as a Black employee. And sometimes I just wonder what life would be like if you just show up to work and just do your job and go home. And then
life would be good.
Yeah. And then, I mean, not to say that it's not good now, because it is very rewarding to see how much change comes from the work.
Yeah, and especially for me, where I left the company and then came back. And if you imagine, I started the first employee network on race, left the company and then came back, and that employee network had been merged into another one. It's grown even bigger. And not only that, they were having senior leaders come to the events, you know. And for me, that was quite a shock, because I was thinking, hold on a minute, like 3 years ago, you guys weren't interested in doing this kind of stuff. But that's the result of the change that's being driven by people like us and sort of trying to create a more inclusive environment.
Yeah.
I think something that we have at JLR, which we don't speak about quite often, is something called bringing your authentic self to work. So like being able to come, 5 days a week with a different hairstyle and not have somebody make some comment or try and grab something on your head,
Yeah.
And I think that's I think Dave Williams, our HR director, has a nice analogy about that, where he says that, if you go about 5, 6, 7 years, we might have been, in the locker room or something like that when it comes to diversity and inclusion. But now we've got our kit on, and we're sort of getting ready to go on the pitch and actually be not just driving it, being driven from employees, but also becoming a leader in the space.
Yeah, I always feel like my experience at JLR, like I owe a lot of the amazing experiences I've had to people like you and Mandisa for the work you guys have done to make the business a very conducive space. Because I think when I compare my experience, I've been at JLR since 2018, started my career at JLR. When I compare my experiences to that of my friends who went to like different industries or different companies, I feel like I've gotten really lucky with the JLR, because it's somewhere I really see myself progressing. The other thing I was going to add on to difficulties, although I wouldn't really say it's a difficulty, it's just something to keep in mind, because you can very easily miss it. I think it's very important that when you're in this space doing this type of work, it's important to think outside of your own immediate experiences and think about how you can make sure that you're not excluding people from other minority groups. So for
100%.
example, when the Reach Network is doing things related to Black people, it's very important to me to make sure that those initiatives also cater to Black women, and also cater to, neurodiverse people. Like, yes, I'm Black, and yes, I'm a woman, and yes, I'm an immigrant. And so there's all these things. But I also need to make sure that when I'm driving initiatives, they're also inclusive of like neurodivergent people or Black women who have disabilities at JLR. So making the conscious and active effort to make sure that you are being intersectional and you are being inclusive in the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
I don't think people miss it deliberately. I think it's just something that's easy to miss if you're not actively doing it.
Yeah, and I think that goes to the point you made earlier about thinking more outside of your own experiences.
Yeah.
And thinking about the people that you work with and that kind of thing. The other difficulty is, I think, the fact that, like you said, you're doing all of this extra work on top of your day job. So burnout is an issue.
Yeah.
Especially since I think, in general, this sort of work is led and pushed forward by Black women. It might surprise you, it might not, but that is true, especially at JLR. I think Reach has had 4 chairs, 3 of which have been women, and 2 of them have been Black women, including the founder, actually. So that's another thing that we need to take care of. And if you see somebody doing that kind of work, just whatever you can do. Not everybody is going to be interested in doing this kind of stuff, but if you are, whatever you can do to get involved, support and that kind of stuff, it'd be absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Can we give them a round of applause for the insight? Wow.
Thank you.
So many things that I've even learnt myself. We can talk about it after the wow. Just because of time, guys, if you have any questions, please scan the QR code quickly so I can ask our lovely panelists some of the questions you've sent in. One question that I do want to ask from the Slido is, does a sponsor have to be someone you know, or can it be someone random in the company?
So I want to say don't pick someone you know. So with Project Orbit, the way I'm not taking credit for this. The way Mandissa's run this and the panel, the way they've run this is that you have people sign up. So we've had Black women sign up, and then they also have senior leaders within the business sign up to it as well. And then they basically review all the applications, not really applications from Black women, but they review everyone who signed up and then identify people in the right areas to like sponsor other people. So when I went in, I had someone in mind that I wanted to be my sponsor. And when I spoke to Mandisa and someone else in the group about it, they said, you already have this connection with this person. You need to make sure you have other people in your network. And so I would say get someone to match up with someone you don't know as well. So then you kind of have multiple people in your corner, you know?
And I would definitely agree with that. One, because somebody that doesn't know you, doesn't work in your area, can have a different perspective to you and the people that work there. So, for example, I am reverse mentoring one of the directors of our company who reports directly to the CEO. And I've learned a lot from him about what happens at that level, right? And if you just went with, I don't know, a manager you know or a friend of a friend, et cetera, something like that, you will not get that level of exposure. Yeah. So I think definitely somebody you don't know in a different area, ideally a few levels more senior than you.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Amazing. Last question. I'll combine two. It is, how has your sponsorship experience been? And also, how does someone get involved with Project Orbit or the other mentorship initiatives at JLR? Bit of a loaded question.
My experience with the sponsorship has been amazing so far. So I have a mentor and a sponsor. I have a meeting every 2 weeks with them separately, not together. And it's been really helpful. I'll focus on my sponsor because that's what the question was on. And the insights I've gotten from her have been amazing. So when we initially got paired, my sponsor is a white woman, and I initially thought, I don't know if she'll get it, but it's been amazing how much I can tell that she's done the work and the research on her end, and how helpful she's been with identifying very specific actions for what I need to do. So like, I don't leave our sessions thinking, oh, that was really vague, or this is a rough strategy. She's very specific about X, Y, Z. These are the things we need to do. This is when we need to do them. This is how we go about it. And also seeing how she also always starts out with asking what I think. So it doesn't feel like she's telling me what to do. So she's like, what do you think this should look like? And then she expands on that and we refine it. So I've learned a lot from her, and it's only been like 4 months. So yeah. And then in terms of how you can get involved, obviously you have to like be a JLR employee.
So hint,
so I would start there.
Start applying.
Having said that though, if you go to the next slide, we have an event coming up as part of Black History Month, where you have a chance to come interact with people like us and other people at the company. Networking is very, key. Very important, and build your contacts that way.
Yeah, and guys, if you want to register, there's a QR code just here. So if you're interested, please scan the QR code. It is on the 15th of October, which is a Tuesday, from 5 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. There's food and networking, and also a launch showcase. It's Caribbean food. Yes. Wow. Amazing.
Can I just add one last thing? Sorry, just in case the person that asked the question actually does work at JLR already. If you send me a message on Teams, I will send you the link that you need to fill out. There's a form. It's very straightforward. It's not like an application form. It's literally your name, what you want to do in the next year and a half or whatever, and your role. And then we start the matching process and go from there. Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank
That is
you.
the end of the Q&A. Guys, let's give our guests a massive round of applause. Amazing. Thank you so much for the insight and for all the work that you're doing at JLR.